I'm going to get it kicked off this afternoon, and I'm joined by Kathy Allen. So hi, Kathy. Also, Daniel Lossie is back with us this month. Hi, Daniel. Yep. And Chris Kyle is here too. Hi, Chris.
Hello everyone.
Yeah, so we are your co-hosts today. So we want to already get on your calendar our next meeting. So our meeting in August. Now, normally we meet Tuesdays or Wednesdays. We're switching it up next month. We're going to meet on Thursday, August 26th, once again at 1 p.m. Central Time. So little different this time around, but want to get this in your calendar now. And so that we hope to see you there. So, well, we are very excited for today, as usual, to have conversations with you, and because Chris is going to give us some insight from his master's thesis that he's been pulling together, and the connection between human development and nature and ecology. And so he's going to give us that intro, and then we're going to be able to talk about it, have a discussion around it. So Chris, are we good to go?
I think so. This was real time, folks. I put some PowerPoint work together here just this morning. So I am just going to do this right now. So it's good to see you all here, and I'm going to go and open my slides and share this with you. So here we go. I thought you would stall for more time a little bit there, Steph.
Okay. We can keep going.
No. If you need one more minute, Daniel could introduce.
No. I know what would be actually super helpful, Kathleen, is just give 2 minutes of a summary of what you spoke about last time. Do you remember? Can you? Because this was linked. It was kind of linked. My work was linked to what you shared last time.
Okay, so last time, for those who weren't around for that, I shared some major themes and patterns that came up from listening to people who spoke at the Sustainability and Beyond Virtual Summit in June. And these were people who are all working around sustainability in global, regional, and local levels, and looking for kind of regenerative solutions deeply embedded in the UN Sustainable Development Goals and other kinds of things. And I was listening. My job was to be the theme weaver for the conference, and I was listening for how through their actions, we could understand how they're reimagining leadership as a result of their work. So they aren't really thinking of themselves as people who are kind of leading organizations or leading from a position of power. All of their leadership and systems change work is deeply embedded in that starts with this sense of interdependence. They see the world in an interdependent way, and they therefore build strategies and leadership through interdependence. So partnerships, collaborations, alliances. They're very skilled at also kind of almost gamifying the system. So they're very much building leadership change strategies by aligning with the natural dynamics of the larger system, the living system, the human dynamics of a system. Hank Rogers, for example, he's the guy who invented Tetris, and he's a kind of a tech billionaire, and he's trying to figure out. He's the founder of the Blue Planet Foundation and then the Blue Planet Alliance. And so his work is very deeply, like everybody else's, deeply connected to purpose. Almost all of these people ask the question, what is the deep need in the world that I am uniquely positioned to respond to? And as a result, they then did things like Don Libet created the elemental accelerators, which is really about helping innovators who are building sustainable solutions through innovation to take their innovations to scale. And Hank Rogers, he's trying to figure out, how do we use a tech kind of gamification process that would draw people in to change their own individual habits and behaviors. And when they achieve that, they can go back in the game and level up to another set of sustainable behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. So it's there's a lot. I just wrote a blog on that, and so I'll put a link to that blog in the chat room too.
Great, thank
So,
you.
Chris,
Thanks,
did
thanks,
that give you
Kathy.
enough time to?
Yeah, that was perfect, but it was also a great segue. So folks, what I'm really been interested in, I'm in a master's program at Prescott College in outdoor education leadership, but it's also kind of bringing in eco-psychology and leadership development and all that. And my particular arena that I'm actually working with Kathy on, Kathy's on my thesis, on my thesis committee. And one of the things that I'm really looking at is nature-based leadership. And my particular lens that Kathy loves in combination to her lens is this intersection of living systems and human development. How do I take living systems all the way back into my own life to develop myself? And that's what Kathy was saying, develop myself as a leader, or just develop myself as a human being that's coming back into right relationship with the whole system. Because as Daniel has said so beautifully in the past, is we've simply just broken our relationship with nature. It doesn't mean it can't be mended and brought back into kind of right relationship. But this is the thing that so much of the conversation is living systems and organizational shifts in the whole system. I get it, but how do we bring it all the way back home into our own lives? So this is that intersection of living systems and human development. So what I've been exploring is this idea that kind of came through a quote from Peter Kahn, who's a well-known eco-psychologist and written kind of a seminal book on eco-psychology. And he says this is we need nature for our physical and psychological well-being, right? We all know that to a certain degree, but now we're bringing it home all the way into our own selves and our own bodies. We always have. Our bodies and minds came of age interacting with the natural world that sustained and resisted our being. And through both processes, shared the contours of what it means for humans to flourish, right? So I want to bring this all the way down into the individual that is still part of the whole, a part of the system. So this is what we're going to explore. The three contexts that I like to think about here. This is the broad context of this intersection of human development and living systems, is that human development is through an ecological lens as a context. So many people have been writing about that, including Yuri Bronfenbrenner, even Peter Kahn, others, even those that are in the deep ecology world. So Joanna Macy, Bill Plotkin, others, is human development seen through that ecological lens. And this is a rise of thinking around that. Also a rise of eco-psychology. That's literally, eco-psychology is only about 25 years old as an actual, discipline. And, somebody quoted the eco-psychology term in the 70s, 80s, but it's really just been rising over the last 20, 25 years. So this is idea of our psychological well-being and our psychological processes and development within the context of the ecosystem ecology of the natural world, right? So eco-psychology. Another context is applying nature's design principles to human activity. It's a lot of where Kathy's work comes in, or others like even Janine Benrus and others that are applying design principles to look at how could we bring this into our own lives. So that's actually bringing living systems, structures, thinking ideas into our own human way of being, human activity. So this is what's going to be the kickoff, I think, to our beautiful conversation today amongst us, is then the three themes of intersection of living systems and human development that I was playing with. And actually, I came up with a lot more. There's like 5 or 6 or so different themes that I felt had this intersection, but these felt the strongest and most obvious. And that is interconnectedness, feedback loops, and resilience. Now, we've all heard that in the terms of living systems, but now we get to apply it also as, okay, living systems, but how might that apply back to our lives as human beings and developing ourselves, developing our leadership, developing our capacities, being more attuned to what the whole system is asking for or seeking from us. So interconnectedness, just some points for each of these is, so interconnectedness, it's a fundamental aspect of living systems. We all talk about it. It's the start of Kathy's book, is that there's interconnectedness, and also that sense that everything is part of the whole and working with each other, or even the tensions within the system. So interconnectedness is part of the whole system. In our living system that is planet Earth, all beings are connected, interacting with the other elements all the time. And folks, that's us as humans too. So often my perception as I talk to people is that there's the human culture, there's the natural world, and there's a separation. And this, certainly a lot of the research I did on the scientific revolution and what's happened in Cartesian times, Rene Descartes and all that, literally 300 years ago. And there's this huge split that has happened in our cultural psyche as human beings, that we're in dominion over nature, right? So that comes into the religious constructs and all that, but we are part of it. So if we begin to think in our own development that we're part of the system, that it changes even the way we look at our own development. So change in one part of the system influence other parts of the system in expected, and I love this about a human development lens, is unexpected ways too, right? So are we willing to be unexpectedly, how would you say, unexpectedly shocked by something that helps with our development, or something unexpected comes that shows us a pathway for us to be more whole and connected. So interconnectedness reflects how we see ourselves and our interactions with other humans and the rest of the living system. So that's really important, is that now if we put ourselves, human beings, in the midst of all this, rather than just looking out at a prairie or a mature forest, whatever, oh, wait, I'm walking through that mature forest. Oh, I'm part of this prairie ecosystem. So we actually insert ourselves more fully into the system. And here is the developmental piece, is that this shifts the developmental paradigm from an individualistic and separate developmental cycle. So I want to hit this home because I've been in therapy, I've done a lot of work, I've gone into these developmental cycles, which are very much of a container of me and therapist, or it's all about me. I gotta go back to my original wounding, heal that wounding. But now we begin to see, oh, maybe there's a shift into look at the interdependent paradigm of how I'm growing and evolving. And that's where an individual's growth and development is fully intertwined, interconnected with all of life in the living systems. I would actually say in our developmental paradigm, therapeutic culture, personal growth, personal development, even spiritual development, there's still a lot of the I, me, my, mine. I, me, mine, right? How do I get healthier? How do I get better? How do I get rid of this shameful thoughts, whatever, rather than thinking in myself as how do I develop myself within the whole system? So that's that interconnectedness. Even my development can feel and be attuned to the whole system. And that's why even for me and many of you, just being in nature, going out on a backpacking trip for a week or whatever, there is something about my soul and my being that gets rewrited or readjusted, or something that grounds in me differently than if I'm consciously trying to develop myself as a being. So feedback loops. So the other theme, in addition to interconnectedness, is that the living system, all living systems have feedback loops. So feedback is how the system runs itself. That's the core definition. Systems of information feedback control are fundamental to all life and human endeavor. And everything we do as individuals, as society, or in nature is done in the context of an information feedback system. I mean, frankly, it's in our technology, it's in our day-to-day human interaction, it's certainly in the natural world, right? Two fundamental feedback loops are balancing and reinforcing. So in a way, you can even see how this starts to move toward a human development, or a developmental lens, is what are the feedback loops that are moving in and out of balance? And what are the feedback loops that are reinforcing positive ways of being or positive actions? And then feedback loops provide an individual with information that can be used to make changes, different choices, or gain clarity on the impacts of the individual actions. So this is where we take the idea of living systems feedback loops, what nature's doing, to say we have feedback loops all the time. This group, feedback loop. My conversations with Kathleen, Steph, Daniel, feedback loop. Or therapist or family, community, are we listening and are we attuned to the feedback, and are we open to the feedback, right? Rather than being not open to it. And so here's the thing, for millennia, the natural world has been a potent feedback loop for human beings. And I would say this not just metaphorically, folks, but in actuality, meaning spending time in nature can create a human feedback loop. And that's when we've tracked the seasons, understood the rhythms of the landscape, and worked and lived in harmony with nature. So in some ways, we're trying to reclaim that. I feel that, but it's also within a modern context of our devices, our technology, what we've done to the planet makes it in some ways a harder challenge to come back into these natural rhythms. And the final piece that I'll wrap here is resilience. So we have interconnectedness, feedback loops. And now for these times, in this day and age, I thought this theme was very important because so much is changing so rapidly, and resilience is really being called for at all levels. The planet is going through its own resilience cycle, and our human culture is also having to look at that, and then now our individual resilience. So resilience is defined as the ability to bounce or spring back into shape, position after being pressed or stretched. So it's elasticity. It's like, how do we, there's stressors to the system. How do we bounce back? In a living system, feedback loops provide the structure for this feedback loop around resilience, working in a variety of ways for the system to restore itself even after a shock or a destabilizing event. So now we're back to feedback loops to help within this idea of resilience. And resilience is strengthened by adaptive capacity. And you know what launched this whole thing that we're here with is when we did the adaptive cycle, where if some of you made those calls, we kind of went through this process of looking at the adaptive cycle that nature goes through, but how do we apply it to our own organizations and our own life? And this is really about the capacity of the systems, institutions, humans, and other organizations to adjust to potential damage, to take advantage of opportunities, or to respond to consequences. So we're in this kind of, we can keep looking at the adaptive cycle as a way to help us and guide us. And then this final point is psychological resilience is the ability to mentally or emotionally cope with a crisis or return to pre-crisis status quickly. And what I want to point to here is that this brings it home again from the broader living system of all of the pieces that can create resilience, all the way down into my own psychological resilience of how I can be then working with this incredible change or the drama that's unfolding around us. And then adaptive capacity is what I'm kind of referring to and already spoke to. So that's it. Those are the kind of three things that I think would be great for a conversation. I know Daniel's going to kind of open the space for any questions and then go into the breakout.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. Are there any clarifying questions at this time for what Chris presented before I pose a breakout room question?
There's so much nice alignment between what Chris is, kind of intentionally linking around human and living systems. But there are two thoughts that I have. One is that I've been thinking a lot about what are the kind of core competencies or essential elements to really be able to be skilled at system-wide change, transformation, large-scale change or transformation, even small-scale team, organization, community, family, whatever. And I believe that human development is one of those is one of those competencies. So you have to be able to see the system, think in systems, see culture, influence culture, develop design, see the living system, use the living system to design your strategies for change. And you have to develop people because not everybody's ready to go. So if you aren't skilled in this, and so what I love about what Chris has been exploring, because in our team of 4, one of Chris's kind of core deep interests is really kind of bringing this down to individual level and how we are kind of and what do we need to do to transform ourselves to also transform the world. And so it's just really a critical thing, beautiful thing. So thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Kathy. Emily had a great question, and Chris, you commented in the chat box, but could you elaborate just a little bit? Emily's question was, how do you define right relationship?
Yeah, and I get, sometimes I use that, Emily, as it's kind of a word that comes actually from Buddhist thought and culture. So right relationship, kind of from that sort of spiritual sense of being connected to all that is. And so kind of I hold it as it's being in tune with the entire system that's around us. So that could be the organization, the system of the organization, or the entire planet, family, whatever, and in harmony, if you will, with it, like being willing to use what I just said as a sense of interconnectedness. Am I noticing and watching the feedback loops? And where am I in terms of my own resilience in connection with the resilience of the whole system. So that's this idea of kind of right relationship.
And I would just add on to that, Chris, tell me if this is wrong, but a right relationship is one in where all parties in the relationship hold value. It's not a subject object relationship of use or utilization. It's a relationship of some equal value between.
Yes, great. Good piece. Yeah.
Any other clarifying questions?
Yeah, I think Leanne, if you take yourself off mute.
Thank you. The chat was blocking it, sorry. What about the life cycle? I mean, or over age? Are you looking mostly at adults or thinking about adults? I'm just thinking about having a conversation with my cousins who have younger children, that the pandemic is a way for them to understand that life is not stable. And that things, they can't think that this is over and nothing else is going to change. It's, to build resilience in them, they need to understand that life can be unexpected.
Yeah, that's a great piece, Leanne. Something that I've explored a little bit that I didn't share here is that much of human development in the academic world is life cycle, is life phases development. So you bring a great point that the human development is what happens as a toddler to a teenager as I grow and evolve. And that's fine. And I like that kind of stretch of thinking about my evolvement as a human being from a human development standpoint. And I think it's critical that what I'm sharing with here does start to happen and happen at the younger and younger age, so that the developmental cycle of growth and maturity and understanding of these principles we're talking about happens at 5, 6, 8, 12, 15, and not necessarily starting to happen at 55 or 70. So I do see that, but I do see anybody can enter this idea of the development of self at any age. And it's just how we bring it. Can we bring it to a younger and younger audience to sort of create that generational shift that I think that we're all looking for? So thank you, Leanne.
Our human development theories haven't really served us well, because most of them are built on stages that are age related, that create this much more rigid kind of framework. When I look at this linkage between a living system and human development, these are kind of meta strategies that apply at all levels of scale. So whether it's a toddler, they're seeking feedback. They get interdependence because they depend on interdependence. And as parents, we're trying to figure out, how do we help create an environment where they can be resilient in their ability to manage all the stuff that's coming at them. And so I, in some ways, see these as kind of powerful or wise developmental practices. How do we reinforce our connection individually and interdependence, but how do we do it with people in our teams and our workplaces and our communities? And then where are the rich and vibrant feedback loops? Can we amplify certain feedback loops to accelerate development? Where are the signs of resilience, and what are those things that help contribute to resilience? So they're like the big kind of meta balcony questions of human development, but they're built on the living system frame.
These are some great context setting and some provocative questions. Questioning, is the age breakout of human development the right one, or are there some meta balcony questions? So I really want to hear from you in these breakout rooms. So kind of to summarize, and the more we understand nature, the more we understand ourselves, and the more we understand ourselves, the more we can understand nature. So where are you seeing feedback, interdependence, and resilience showing up in your own personal growth and development, or people you know? Maybe you want to take this lens of what about children, nieces, children, grandchildren, neighbor kids. So at that personal level, where are you seeing feedback, interdependence, and resilience showing up in your personal growth and development? And are you seeing this in your teams and organizations that you're working with? So that's the question. I will post that to chat. And we're going to do breakout rooms with 3 to 4 people per room. And we're going to have about 15 minutes of time for conversation so that everybody's voice can be heard. And I will, if here's the question in chat, and I will do breakout rooms. Any last comments, questions before I whisk you away into your small groups? All right, let's do it. You should be getting a message to join a breakout room. Welcome back.
Fun.
Hope you had fruitful conversations in your small groups. I know room 4 did. I popped in there for a few minutes. What a rich conversation. Thank you, Chris, for setting the context for this.
Mhm.
So we have about 10 minutes to do any large group sharing. So any aha insights or reflective kind of ponderings that you had that you are sitting with right now that you might take back into your day and your life to integrate?
Well, I appreciate the simplicity of the 3 steps, the 3 points that were brought forward. I know I'm on the board of the Nebraska Community Foundation and currently board chair, so I have some leadership responsibilities of that organization, and we're a very generative organization that works in development, community development, and in areas where people dream about doing things. We do things that nobody's ever thought of doing before. At least that's our goal. And so that presents a certain amount of anxiety for a lot of our people working in that realm, and in this time of pandemic and political problems where people are at each other's throats. And here we're trying to build communities when all these interesting forces, I guess you'd call them natural forces, are causing us a lot of anxiety. And this, to me, this little piece is really important, because I think it's something you can take to people and help them understand and cope with the unsettledness that they're feeling as they work, kind of try to figure out what our next job is in the work we do.
And we had 2 really, I think, deep insights about the resilience aspect of it. Leanne was the one, had the first beautiful nugget, which is, where is the source of your security around that helps build your resilience? And if your source of security is outside of yourself, then the more change that's happening and disruption that's happening, the more it hits your individual resilience. And the more the inner-centeredness or internal locus of control you have, then all of the craziness that is going on around you gets reinterpreted through that core. And so it's not as disruptive, and it might help build your resilience. So that was, I thought, a really cool idea. And then the other one was, Dale was sharing that, even though he's seen people around him really struggle with resilience, which is what got us to the, where's your source of security, external factors making you secure or internal, if you stand in the stance of inquiry, learning, observation, without thinking that the world should be a certain way, it also allows you to be more resilient, because you're not disrupted because the world isn't turning out the way you think it should. So some of the folks that I know that have been struggling with resilience they're still trying to struggle with their relationship to control and what they're trying to control.
Yeah. Yes.
So those were a couple of our two thoughts. And the fact, of course, that feedback will get stronger the more you ignore it.
Right.
Irritating, but there it is.
What other insights did you discover in your groups?
Yeah, Bettina, do you want to share you had some beautiful pieces around interconnection and even interconnectedness and resilience. We even talked to that last comment about sort of resilience in the wrong direction. That was kind of nice.
No, well, we had a beautiful discussion about these three topics, and the last topic we commented was the resilience related to a positive feedback loop that makes us go back harder to where we were before, and that is something that worries me a little bit, just because I've been listening to certain parts of the society saying, no, we need to go back far, harder to what was normal before. So to keep an eye on that somehow, and keep educating people in opening their minds, and looking at as you said, Kathleen, I mean, not expecting any result in particular, but being open to the process of learning and change and evolving. And related to interconnectedness, that we explore where we see those things. And for me is, I don't work in a team. I work as an independent coach. So I work with clients. This is one, as Chris mentioned, the human beings connectedness. You can observe the feedback loops there. But because of this pandemic, what I observe is that there is a narrative about the only place to socialize were the offices, and then we need to come back because the social life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But because of this pandemic, we socialize so much with other people we never did before so intensively, like the neighbors or my cousins or people that were related to me but not so close, even the people in the same household who we deepen our relationships with them, and with nature as well. And we observe certain things in nature, like here in Munich, the first 2 months of pandemic, everything stopped literally, and there was no smoke in the city anymore. We could see the moon really bright and clear, and there were animals in the streams and in the forest. So that was something we never experienced before, and that deepened our connection to nature as well. So I think it helped us realize how part of the system we are, and make us think in general, what am I doing that is provoking this? What can I do to stop this from happening? So the problem is not everyone knows what to do.
Right.
Education.
I think
Beautiful,
it'll be really sad if we go back after this pandemic to where we were before and didn't learn and progress and make step function change. I think it's exciting that people are not ready to just run back to work. And, some governors want to blame it on they're getting paid extra money, but I think what I hear is more that they're just not ready to go back to be the slavish corporate stooges that, we were before.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that all pans out.
Great conversation. Simon, you've got a hand up.
Right, thanks. Yeah, just to link something that Bettina just said there, and what we were talking about in our group was, and actually Kathy, where you said, where's the source of security? And Bettina, you said in this pandemic, how we've kind of been connected as humans to kind of so much, so many more people in different ways, maybe through this medium, but also just, face to face. I feel like actually, because all that people really had ultimately was was themselves, their vulnerable human selves, the kind of, was it kind of the soft wild animal body that they were in. And so there's something about the vulnerability of just showing up as a vulnerable human, in a place, yeah, that place can be even just within ourselves, and just say, I don't know the answers, I'm scared, yeah, and just kind of like, asking for help. And that being, I really liked how Emily said, it's then a dialogue rather than a conversation. It's dialogue, so there's meaning in the kind of conversation between the different parties, and that can be with ourselves at the the psychological level. But what we've been really saying here is that doesn't happen in isolation of the kind of the wider living system. So it is about our society, and it is about our ecological home. So and there's no destination in all of this. There is no known kind of where we will be and where we need to be, whatever the norm is, that is changing all the time. So I feel like, there's some qualities, and to Kathy's question, I think before we broke out, it's like, what kind of skills do we really need to have, particularly for those people that sit in high positions of influence and power in very big organizations that are effectively, it's almost kind of at the tiller steering, some parts of the system that control many, many people's lives. And for me, it's that kind of being able to show up with vulnerability and not having the answers to the questions, and actually not to know the answers, not to know, but to kind of just have the awareness of what's happening. That will lead to evolution. It's not about, there's an end game here, it's evolution. Who knows, my life end game, I don't know what that is. I will just have to play it out and see what happens. And I've kind of given up on wanting to know what that is. All I know is that actually, if I kind of live in harmony with the system of all those things I mentioned, myself, my community, that could be my family, where I live, and kind of the wider natural world, then that feels pretty kind of like, feeling good and functioning well was the other term I used.
I love that. Leaning into the unknown. We have time for one more, and I'm wondering if Lauren or Katie, there was a really good insight from the group I was in about how do we indigenize a population and how that impacts resilience. Would either of you want to speak to that for a minute or two? Or I can summarize it.
I'm happy to offer out
what Katie.
So my feet are on the ground on stolen Dakota land in Mankato, Minnesota. It's the site of the largest mass execution on US soil. And so this idea of interdependence and feedback loop and resilience is something that I actually really truly feel and ground into my body in places and spaces I go to. And I've also learned a lot from Dakota elders who've taught and shared ceremony, shared all these pieces. And I think there's something about I keep trying to find this space of holding both the me and the we in place in the present moment, right? So place is a part of that. I as an individual am part of a collective whole, and that what's here shows up in that space. So I've been experimenting and exploring around what that looks like when you incorporate kind of time and space and place with the individual and the collective in this moment. Here.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Katie. So we need to transition to ending and wrapping up and honoring your time. Kathy, did you have one insight you wanted to share before we close?
I was just going to recommend a resource. The Banff Center has a Indigenous leadership wisdom centering work that they're doing, research that they're doing on leadership, and they're framing it up as wise practices. So not good practices, but wise practices that are deeply anchored in place. And one of the things, this wisdom leadership that they're talking about, is they talk about the connection to what our next topic will be on this call, which is that when you develop a spirit of place connection and with the spirit of a place, then you protect what you're connected to. And then that is a way that they build this kind of deep interdependence as a way of being in their life. And so I just offer, check out the Indigenous leadership in the I think it's the Banff Leadership Center. So
and just go to the website, Banff Leadership
Yeah.
Center. Okay, right.
And they're really doing some fun things on wise practices. Indigenous Leadership, Banff Leadership Center. Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Okay.
I don't quite,
I
it
love
might
that.
be close to that topic, but it might be a little tweak of a proposition or something there. But okay,
How
Dan.
wise is that to call it wise practices instead of best?
Yeah, that's the one of the things that they're doing is they're just deeply anchoring a regenerative frame because they're anchored in the land. And you can't exploit the land that you're deeply anchored to. I mean, you can't extract with no consequences if you're not connected, if you are connected to the land. So there's something there that's very powerful.
Wonderful, deep and rich discussion today. Great questions, great insight. Thank you for showing up in your vulnerability and openness and curiosity. Just a reminder, next month, August 26th, it's a Thursday, same time, 1 p.m. Central Time, we'll be joining again. The topic will be the intersection between personal well-being and planetary well-being. So it'll be a rich conversation. We are always taking new people to this call. So when you receive the emails, as a reminder, feel free to share those with your networks and groups and friends and other catalytic leaders that you like to work with or like to hear from, and invite more people to have conversations on these calls. This is a regenerative community that's made up from all of us, by all of us. So thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Be well. Bye, everyone. Ciao.